I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the lingering buzz of the night still humming in my veins. But the emptiness inside me hadn't eased. Beside me, James breathed steadily, his body relaxed in contentment. He thought he'd given me exactly what I needed. He was wrong. I turned toward him, my fingers tracing lazy patterns across his chest, feeling the faint tension still coiled beneath his skin. His smirk was slow, amused. Leaning in, I brushed my lips against his ear and whispered, "I think you should text your friends." For a brief moment, his body tensed. Then amusement flickered in his eyes before he chuckled softly, reaching for his phone. A few taps, and it was done. Now, all that was left was to wait. The ice in my glass had long since melted, but I barely noticed. The low murmur of conversation around me was distant, irrelevant. My body was here, but my mind was still tangled in the events of the previous night. I hadn't been looking for it, but when I found it, I couldn't turn away. I'd been searching for something raw, something intense. Everything else had felt empty. Then I stumbled upon it. A woman, surrounded by 5 men, each one demanding her attention, taking control without hesitation or restraint. There was no slow build, no choreography, just raw, uncontainable intensity. I clicked without thinking, and the moment the video started, I was lost. She trembled under their touch, gasping, breaking apart as they moved her, and I felt everything. Pleasure washed over me, violent and overwhelming, leaving me breathless, shaken. But it wasn't enough. Hours later, I could still feel the aftershocks, a deep ache in my body, a hum beneath my skin. The video had ended, but the sensation lingered. I wanted to experience what she had, to feel what she felt. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I noticed them. 4 men, casual conversation, drinks in hand. One had tattoos creeping past his sleeves. Another carried himself with a smirk that suggested he was always in control. They hadn't seen me yet, but I heard them, and it felt like they were speaking directly to me. "Most women say they want something wild," one mused. "But when it's real, they hesitate." Another chuckled. "You can't blame them. Most don't even know what they really want. That's why they need to be shown." Their words sent a jolt through me. They weren't talking about me, but it felt like they were. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the movement speak for me. One of them, James, caught my eye. A dangerous smile curled at the corner of his mouth. I didn't look away. He stretched, drink in hand, his movements deliberate, casual, but I knew exactly what he was doing. He was coming to me. When he reached me, he settled in close, the heat of his presence pressing against my skin. His dark eyes gleamed with amusement. "You've been listening." His voice was smooth, low. I traced the rim of my glass with my finger, tilting my head slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Hard not to," I replied, my voice steady. He smirked, taking another slow sip of his drink. "And did you agree with what you heard?" I didn't break eye contact. "Maybe." His amusement deepened, but something else lurked beneath it. A challenge. He set his glass down, fingers tapping lightly on the bar. "I live upstairs," I said simply. No room for ambiguity. James exhaled a quiet laugh, clearly impressed. "You don't waste time. Neither do you." That was all it took. He drained his glass, set it down with finality, and nodded toward the door. "Lead the way." I didn't hesitate. The elevator ride was charged with tension, neither of us speaking, yet the weight of his presence pressed against me. By the time we reached my apartment, my hands were steady, but my pulse was anything but. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, but before I could turn, he was already there. His hand pressed against the door, closing it softly behind him, trapping me between him and the wood. His breath skimmed my neck, and when I turned to face him, his mouth found mine in a deep, demanding kiss. His lips were firm, claiming the moment without hesitation. I tangled my fingers into his shirt, pulling him closer. My back hit the wall. I had started this. Now I was letting it unfold. His hands slid over my waist, confident, unhurried. Every touch ignited something restless, something raw. He lifted me effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me toward the bed. When my back hit the mattress, I gasped, breath catching as he hovered over me. His weight pressed me into the sheets, strong, deliberate. His fingers traced my thigh, pushing fabric aside. His mouth left a trail of heat down my neck, across my collarbone. He knew exactly how to take control, how to make my body respond. And I let him. The intensity built quickly, fast, hungry. His hands gripped, his body moved with practiced ease. The tension spiraled, winding tighter and tighter, until I couldn't hold on any longer. And when I finally surrendered, pleasure crashed over me like a storm. Fierce, sudden. My breath broke apart as everything unraveled. The air was thick in the aftermath. My fingers still clung to his shoulders, my body trembling beneath him. It had been intense. So good. But as the high faded, as my breath steadied, I felt it. The lingering ache. I was exhausted, yet unsatisfied. The hunger inside me hadn't faded. James brushed a lazy hand down my thigh, his smirk amused. Did that satisfy your curiosity? I met his gaze, my lips still trembling, my pulse still unsteady. I didn't need to answer. We both knew the truth, not even close. The room was warm, the air thick with sweat and skin. James lay beside me, satisfied. I wasn't. That hunger still gnawed at me, deep and relentless. My body felt spent, but inside, something still burned. I turned toward him, trailing my fingers down his chest. His muscles tensed beneath my touch. His smirk curled lazily, amusement flickering in his half-lidded eyes. I leaned in close, my lips brushing his ear. I think you should text your friends. His smirk faltered, just for a second. Then amusement flickered in his gaze, quickly followed by something else. Realization. You're serious, he murmured. I met his stare, unwavering. Do I look like I'm joking? James chuckled quietly, shaking his head. He reached for his phone, tapped out a message, then set it aside. Turning back to me, his smirk sharpened. His fingers traced a slow line up my arm. His voice was low, teasing. You have no idea what you just asked for. I stretched beside him, exhaling slowly, anticipation swirling deep in my stomach. Now all I had to do was wait. Please subscribe my channel. Thanks for watching.